standing, and he was waving at me, and he said something to me, and I rolled down my window. I was like, "What?" And he's like, "You and I are gonna be forever." And I said, "I don't know about that, but this was fun." I came outside and hung out with him a little bit and said, "Listen, dude, I think you're cool, and it's okay to be different, and it's okay to be like," he's like, "I know you probably feel like you don't fit in right now, but he's like, you're gonna regret not being yourself and be yourself the rest of your life." And he told me that is why he became a hairdresser, and that is why he is who he is today. And it was all because of that one conversation he had with Jeff at Christmas time at my parents' house.
He's always the type of guy to me that I could tell anything. He always knew that I had something on my mind or if I wasn't feeling just right. And he always just would make me feel better. And he was just such a personable, close friend. And I'm really going to miss him. But on the other hand, I know, again, someday I'll see him on the other side.
And he was different. He actually wanted to talk to my mom and dad. He wanted to learn things. He gravitated toward, especially my mom. My mom is only 4'8". Jeff is that tall. He loved to go and put his arm around her and stand next to her. And she always made fun of how big his feet were. And she would always say his toes were like fingers. And
Liliana has those feet.
And everything that she cooked, he wanted to try. I mean, he wanted to try, and then he asked about the culture, which, made my mother and father happy as well. He wanted to learn. Even after high school, through college, and he would call me once a month, and he would always call me, and I could tell it was him on the other line because he always called me by my Korean name. He would always, and I knew he was in a good mood when he did that. He always called me by my Korean name and asked what was going on. I honestly think that he thought of us as a second family because the relationship he had with my younger sister, Heidi, was like a brother-sister hate relationship. I mean, he loved to torture her. And she was deadly afraid of frogs, and one day he caught a frog, and he chased her around the yard with it. And she still brings that story up about how Jeff chased her around the yard with that frog, and she was just terrified of it. Dinah had brought up funny stories. The only funny thing that I can think of was I think we were maybe juniors or seniors in high school. I can't remember, but he had gone to visit his mother in New Hampshire. And he was there for a week, and he called me like he always does. He always called every time and told me how the trip was going, everything. And he mentioned, "Hey, you guys had lobsters?" And I said, "No, I see it at Meyer, in those cages, but I don't think we've had any." He goes, "Well, I'll bring some back for you." And I said, "What, you're just going to ship it back?" And he says, "No, I'll bring them on the plane with me." And I said, "What? You can't do that. I mean, how are you?" He goes, "No, I think I can do that." He carried on, I think it was 6 to 8 live lobsters with him on the plane. He brought them back, and that night he came over to our house, and we cooked them up, and our whole family had a really nice lobster dinner. So that's the Jeff that I remember.
Story I remember that's absolutely hilarious. He was a sleepwalker. And I've had many moments with Jeff, moments of walking out into the living room and Jeff being in our living room. And one time I went out there and he was like rustling papers all around. And I was like, "Jeff, go back to bed." And he's like, "I'm in a business meeting. Don't bother me." And it would be like 2 a.m. And then another time he sleepwalked out in the hallway to go to the bathroom. And I'll never forget that in our condo building. And I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I have to go to the bathroom." I was like, "The hallway is not it." But he told me about his fraternity days, about one time when he was at his frat house. He slept naked a lot, because that was Jeff. And he sleptwalked into somebody else's room. and got into bed with them. And I remember he never lived that one down, ever.
Jeff's favorite thing to do with me was to annoy me. And I mean this really sincerely. Like, he loved to bug the shit out of me. And, you know, when that's happening in your life, you sort of like have that like, and in the last couple of months, I realized just how great that was and how much I'm actually going to miss that about him. His presence was a lot bigger than I realized when he was here. And so I'm here just to say that, you know, we all miss him a lot, and I miss him an incredible amount. And Jeff, I really wish that you were here to basically annoy the fuck out of me some more.
We were downstairs getting ready, and Jeff comes down. It's early, and he walks into the kitchen. I'm either fixing coffee, and yes, and he's in his boxer shorts and his underwear, and he's got a T-shirt on, and he leans up against the cupboard, and he's got this look on his face, and I'm going, Jeff, is everything okay? He said, oh yeah. He said, I just want to ask you two for your permission to marry your daughter. And we both said yes, and we are so happy we did.
We came down to Chicago to babysit because Jeff and Diana wanted to do one of their Halloween things that they did every fricking year, okay? So anyways, first of all, please understand that he's the best son-in-law I could think of for my daughter, okay? So don't take this wrong. But we're babysitting. We'll be home by 12:30. Don't worry. We'll be home. Well, finally at 2 o'clock, I said, I'm going to sleep. So we're sleeping in the living room on a blow-up bed, and 3-something in the morning, the door opens up, and in comes Diane and Jeff, and neither one of them are coherent, okay? And all I hear from Jeff is, shh, let's not wake your parents. Well, I open up my eyes and I look up there, and he says, oh, they're awake, okay. And he comes over to me, he says, come on, we're gonna party. I said, go to hell, I'm sleepy. Okay, so that was Jeff. He always wanted to party at some of the wrong times, I think. But
So anyways, he came over, and he's like, I've been eyeing you all day. Why won't you come say hi to me? And I was like, I don't know. Who are you? And so he started talking to me, and I was about to move to Chicago. And I was like, I'm not in the mood for a relationship. I'm starting a new life in Chicago. And I said, you look like this guy, you know those GQ dad ads in the GQ magazines? And I was like, I'm not gonna remember your name tonight, but I'm gonna call you GQ dad. And he's like, well, funny to say, I'm gonna be in Chicago in November for his short-term modeling stint. So Jeff was a model for a very short time, about 6 months, 7 months. I have some of the pictures. I don't know if they're in the slideshow, but in that poster board I have up front, is pictures from his headshots. And he's like, I'm doing a modeling show in Chicago. And I was like, well, if you're around, you should call me. And we talked all night long. And I was like, oh, this is such a pretty boy. But then he started talking about, I was like, I'm not into models. I'm not into frat boys. He started talking about Anne Rice and how he loves Anne Rice books. And I was like, oh. And then he started talking about bands he was into. And he was like into Maisie Starr and the Indigo Girls and like things that I was like, oh, really? Like he was into Lilith Fair. And I was like, oh, like maybe this guy is not a frat boy. Maybe there's something more to him. And but then he left and he never gave me his number or anything. And I was like, whatever. It didn't mean anything. And then all of a sudden, about 3 days after the wedding, I get a call and he's like, so when is our first date? That's the first thing he says to me. I'm like, who's this? And he's like, I'm GQ dad. And I was like, how did you get my number? And he's like, no. I was like, I'd like to take you on a date. And I'm like, I'm moving to Chicago. And he's like, no, I'd like to take you on a date. And I was like, I'm moving to Chicago. And he's like, I'd like to take you on a date. And you're not going to say no. And so I said yes. And I said, well, if you want to take me on a date, you have to go to a dinner, a goodbye dinner. And all my friends are throwing me a goodbye dinner at this Italian restaurant in Grand Rapids. So you come to that. And so he's like, all right, I'll go to that. And he agreed to it. And he came. And I'll never forget, Mike, where's Mike? Right here. And you were so awkward and weird because you thought I was setting Jeff up with you. Yes. So I brought him to this dinner, and my friend Mike had sort of just come out of the closet, and he was like, I was like, why did you act so weird at that dinner with Jeff? He's like, because I thought you were hooking Jeff up with me. So Jeff said, can I take you further once all my friends left for dinner? And I said, okay. And so we went for a walk in downtown GR along the water. And he was just telling about his life. And Princess Diana died that day. And Jeff cried. And I was like, wow. I was like, he's like, you don't understand. Like, I had some sort of connection with Princess Diana. I found his VHS tape of Princess Diana's funeral. And he was like, he's like, she was an amazing person. She was an amazing humanitarian. And he was like telling me how much she meant to him. And I was like, oh my God, like, he's not just some empty frat boy. There's something more there. There's something more underneath there. And he's like, can I take you to my apartment? I don't remember whose apartment we were staying at. Mine. Was it yours? So he's like, can we rent a movie and stay at this apartment in downtown GR? And I'm like, okay. So we rented Fargo. And I had already seen it in the movie theater, and he hadn't seen it. And but we ended up talking through the whole thing. And we were in the kitchen, and I sat on the countertop, and we were eating chips. And I just remember him saying, I feel really weird, but can I ask you for a kiss? And I said yes. And I thought it was really amazing that he just didn't kiss me. He actually asked for a request for a kiss. And because he's like, I'm a gentleman, and I don't just like kiss people unless I have their permission. And it was a very hot makeout session. And he took off his shirt, and he was like working out for his modeling stint. So he had a six-pack, and I remember being like, oh my God. But what people don't realize is that Jeff was extremely sensitive. He loved our children like so amazingly. And he had opportunities to move up in his company, and he refused his opportunities because he wanted to be home in time to read them bedtime stories. And he wanted to be home in time to help with bedtime. He wanted to be home in time to help them with homework. And he did that on a regular basis. He did laundry, he cleaned the house, and he met me, and I was a hot mess. I was messy all the time. And he had a little bit of OCD, and he was like, we're gonna start cleaning a lot. And I know I had a thing for animals, and he loved animals so much. And I knew that this wasn't just a fraternity guy. This was a very sensitive, amazing, deep guy that I could spend the rest of my life with. And I absolutely fell in love with him. And he was the first guy that I really, truly fell in love with. And we miss him so much. And I thank all of you for being here. And I know how all of you meant so much to him in different ways. And I keep hearing stories about how he's impacted people's lives. I had a friend of his from work who came to me and said when she had a miscarriage, Jeff was the only person that hugged her and cried with her, and that he understood how awful what she went through. And she said that impacted her more than anybody in her whole life, and that's how Jeff was. When Jeff passed away and my neighbors across the street found out that he had passed away, they're a Muslim family, huge Muslim family that lives in this giant castle. Anyone that's visited me knows they're from the castle. And they came over, the mother and all the families, and they said that your family, and including Jeff, was one of the few families in the neighborhood that have like taken us in open arms. And they said that Jeff loved them and he was so kind to them. And the fact that I saw how affected they were by his passing, he didn't care what religion, race, sexuality. He was a person who just loved people for who they were. And he was honest. He was brutally honest, as a lot of people will tell you. He never lied. He never bullshitted with people. If you what you take is what you get with Jeff. And I think that's what I fell in love with him for, because I knew that if I was doing something stupid, he would call me out on it.